The U.S. Department of Energy is cleaning up the Oak Ridge Reservation of residual hazardous and radioactive contamination left over as a result of decades of nuclear energy research. Much of that work has been influenced by the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board, a citizens panel that provides independent advice and recommendations on DOE's cleanup operations. You're welcome to attend the meetings and be part of this important work. For more information, call us or visit our website.
All right. Everybody's quiet tonight. We'll get started with our April 8th meeting, regular board meeting. Everyone's enjoyed the sunshine and the pollen. We will turn this over to federal. I believe Ms. Robbins.
Yes, thank you, Chris. Good evening. I'm Teresa Robbins. This is my first time visiting the Site-Specific Advisory Board. I am Eric Old's Deputy Manager for the Oak Ridge Environmental Management Office. He had a last-minute conflict and asked me to pinch hit for him, and I was happy to because I was looking forward to meeting everyone. A little bit about my background. I've been with the Department of Energy since 1991, so quite a bit of time. Most of my time has been at Y-12, but the majority of my experience is on the National Nuclear Security Administration portion of the Department of Energy. So I am new to environmental management. I'm learning lots. Roger and Steve and Melissa and Abby, and they're all teaching me many, many, many things. I don't know all the acronyms yet, but I'm working on it really hard. And I'm just really super excited to be here. There's so much great work going on with the environmental management program here at Oak Ridge. And so it's a delight to be part of the program. I am originally from Powell. So I joke sometimes I have a PhD, a Powell High diploma. I do not have a doctorate, but I am a nuclear person by training, nuclear engineer from the University of Tennessee. So been around the Department of Energy complex, but Tennessee's home, so I've been here quite a while. I have some prepared notes here that Eric had put together, so I'm gonna cover those briefly, but happy to answer any questions that you may have about me or anything that I share. One of the exciting things that we've experienced this week, and this is why Eric could not be here tonight, is our Assistant Secretary, Tim Walsh, has been in town since yesterday. And he's been able to see so far all the work that we're doing at Y-12, all of the work that we've achieved and are still working on at the former K-25, the East Tennessee Technology Park. And today we were out at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and he has been very impressed with all of the accomplishments of the environmental management program here, but he is also very impressed with the community partnering and collaboration with regulators, with just the community support for the environmental management work here. And he looks forward to continuing to see great progress. So that's he always says, the Secretary of Energy's priorities of national security, energy dominance, and cutting edge science and technology all happens here in Oak Ridge. We support all three of the priorities for the department, and we are getting it done ahead of everyone else. He thinks we are probably the best deal in the government for environmental cleanup work across the DOE sites, that we get more volume done per dollar than anywhere else. And so that's a compliment to the team here. I'm getting to take advantage of the success of the folks that have been here working this for many, many years. So he is very, very much appreciative of what we've done, and he wants to take the model and, as Eric says, the magic of what we have here to other locations. And that is why Eric and I now have responsibility for Portsmouth and Paducah as well. And so we're taking some of what we've learned and been able to accomplish here to other locations within the country. We have been completing a few milestones that you guys have probably been tracking, hopefully online, but we completed the Alpha 2 demolition at Y12. That was 6 months ahead of schedule, so that is very good. It supports the national security mission at Y12 and freeing up land for them to do new nuclear or to modernize their existing facilities that are from the Manhattan Project to continue to do the national security mission there. And then we also we have completed a technology demonstration of how to dispose of sodium shields from the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. So we have shipped 3 of those to a company in Texas called Veolia. And they have been able to demonstrate that they can dispose of those sodium shields. And so that gets a long-standing waste form off of the reservation. We are working to find ways to continue to do more of those sodium shields. So those are some recent successes. And I'm going to turn it over to Roger to see if he has anything else from the federal perspective to add.
No, I would like to say that we feel very fortunate to have Teresa here. She left out 2 things out of her synopsis that some of you may have remembered. Teresa, she actually was the site manager for Y12, which is not a trivial thing. Then once she got bored doing that, she actually went to headquarters and actually served as acting administrator for the NNSA. That's not small business, you know? And so she brings a skill set and a background that is probably completely unique. And we are very, very fortunate for her. So it's not often you get to embarrass your boss. So you got to take those shots. But other than that,
It's not performance period time.
No. But it never. The one thing I would add on though to what she talked about, the sodium shields, that is a huge thing for us. If some of you have been around long enough, you remember we practice emergency response exercises every year, you know, just in case something goes wrong, and it never seems to really go wrong. It did go wrong one time for us when we actually had a release offsite. Fortunately, it didn't cause any, it ended up showing up, but it was related to the sodium shields. And we had a sodium fire from, they were trying to drain one of the tanks and it got away from them. So this is a really big deal for us to be able to get rid of these things. So it's been very fortunate. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Federal, Christoph?
So I have the only one announcement. Our division of remediation is in the process of being combined with the division of solid waste management. The new division is going to be called the Division of Land Protection. So I'm going to be working on the remediation section in Oak Ridge Environmental Fields. So it's a process. I guess our federal counterparts are familiar with all these changes. For us, it's a big deal.
Samantha, you're online. Do you have anything?
Hi, yeah, excuse me if I'm repeating myself, but I had broken my back and had a spinal injury, which kept me out of work for a number of months. And Jana Dawson was selected to replace me as the Federal Facility Agreement Manager. But when I was able to return to work part-time, my supervisor assigned me to the lead for the East Tennessee Technology Park and for me to continue my role here. So Jana is the current Federal Facility Agreement Project Manager, but I'm still your liaison. I'm grateful to be here tonight.
Thank you. We will turn go to our presentation portion. It's on reindustrialization and historic preservation activities at ETTP. Issue group on that is Clark and Thompson. And Mr. Cook, turn it over to you.
Thanks, Chris. I want to tell you about some successes and challenges that we've had in preserving the atomic legacy of the K-25 site. I'm what's called the K-25 Historic Preservation Coordinator. That's one of the roles I play. That came out of a Section 106 process under the National Historic Preservation Act, where they wanted someone to take on that role. And I go forward here. There we go. I'm not pushing hard enough, maybe. So in the foreground of this image here, you see the William J. Wilcox K-25 Interpretive Center. Some of you guys are probably aware that we opened that to the public this past August. That is the largest commitment that we've completed to date in our commitments to historic preservation that we made through compliance with the National Historic Preservation Act. In the background, you see the K-25 footprint that this building overlooks. So I want to talk a little bit how we got to this place of having this building open to the public, what remains to be done, and what we've learned. So first thing we'll do is zoom out a little bit. A lot of you guys are familiar with some of this history, but we'll zoom out a little bit to understand that site history and its significance, because that's what drove us to building that building that you just saw there. And then the National Historic Preservation Act compliance. How does a program like ours get involved in historic preservation? So we'll talk about that. Preservation and interpretation of the site, what we've done and what we've learned. So we zoom out a little bit. The K-25 site was one of 3 sites in Oak Ridge that was part of the Manhattan Project. And the Manhattan Project came about in the early 1940s, 1941. The origin story of it was 1939, a letter from Albert Einstein to President Roosevelt expressing the concerns of the scientific community about our adversaries. And again, the context is World War II, our adversaries developing a powerful weapon from uranium. And that led Roosevelt to establish the Advisory Committee on Uranium. That became the Manhattan Project. And that project had sites all across this country. But the 3 primary sites were Oak Ridge, Los Alamos, and Richland. So now if I zoom in on the Oak Ridge side a little bit, I just want to talk about the K-25 site. Like I said, there was three sites that were part of the Manhattan Project in Oak Ridge, one at X10, one at Y12, and at K-25. I don't want to talk about the K-25 site. This is an aerial view of that site in 1942. And I show this just to hopefully impress upon us all the change that happened virtually overnight to this site. You can see that curly thing up through there is Poplar Creek. And you can see the farmland around there. This was a farming community. It was known as the wheat community. It had some flat land, which made it obviously attractive. If those of you who are familiar with this site, you'll recognize where some of those large process buildings went. It was an attractive site because there was some leveling that had to be done, but there was also a lot to work with in the first place. And there was available water for cooling water, which these facilities would need. So again, that image you saw was 1942. 3 years later, this building has been built along with the site that surrounds it that includes hundreds of buildings, its own road network, infrastructure of all kinds, massive power brought to the site. So an amazing amount of things happened in that span of 3 years. The site became this sort of city almost overnight. I mean, there were thousands of people that lived in a housing community that supported the construction of this site. There was its own security, emergency response. It was a completely self-contained community in a sense. This building was significant because of its historic occasion at which it was built. It was built during World War II. It was the largest building in the world when it was built, at 5.2 million square feet under roof. It spanned 44 acres. Each of those wings, the left and the right, which are west and east wings. So you're looking to the north here. I'm sorry, you're looking to the south here. I'm sorry. So the left is the east wing, the right is the west wing. Those are half-mile long. So it's a very large building that was built. It was built in 16 months, which is extraordinary and sort of reflected the urgency of the moment that it was built in. Construction started when the design work for the process equipment that would go inside the building had not even been completed yet, which is relatively unheard of for construction. And so it was extraordinary for a lot of reasons, but the most important reason was because of the occasion of its build. And that occasion is reflected in the scale of the building and the speed at which the building was built. So just that significance is reflected in that building being designated as the Manhattan Project signature facility. That was a term that DOE applied to it back, I think, in the 90s originally. It was part of the Manhattan Project National Historic Park. That park was created in 2015. A lot of you guys are aware. And it was more recently, it was designated as American Chemical Society National Historic Chemical Landmark. So a very significant building from a standpoint of technology, scale, purpose, all of those reasons. And so the site, that building continued to enrich uranium, and it was enriching uranium using gas diffusion is a massive consumer of energy. One of the reasons the site was chosen was proximity to Norris Dam and available power from TVA. But additionally, on-site power was built to supplement that. But that building operated from the 1940s to the 1960s, producing highly enriched uranium for weapons production. And then starting from the 60s through the 80s, it produced low enriched uranium for commercial nuclear applications. Then in the mid-80s, the site was shut down. And that led to the demolition of the building starting in 2008. You see that on the right there. Because of the significance of the building, the historic significance of the building, DOE was required on the National Historic Preservation Act to enter into consultation through the Section 106 parties with stakeholder community. The stakeholder community wanted to try to retain something of the former building, something real, something authentic. But because of contamination, nothing could be retained. We had to demolish the building in its entirety, along with over 500 other buildings on the site. We did manage to leave a portion of the slab, which is kind of a remnant of the historic footprint of the former building. This is a zoom out further at that site, the K-25 site, and all the buildings you see in green there were demolished. You see in this, right there is the K-25 building. That was the first of the large process buildings. There was eventually K-27 down to the west of that, southwest of that. There was built K-29, K-31, K-33. They, in a sense, formed this U, if I could get that. There we go. These were all connected. And so the buildings after 25 were built, except for the K-27 was built during the Manhattan Project. Then the subsequent buildings were built as part of the Cold War build out of the site. So the environmental management program had to demolish over 500 buildings at the site, do soil remediation. These are the buildings that were taken out. As part of that process, under the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act, the law under which we work, we have to abide by other laws. One of those is the National Historic Preservation Act, as I mentioned. That led to consultation with these 12 parties shown here. Among them are the National Park Service, the City of Oak Ridge, the State Historic Preservation Office, the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, and others that you see here. One of the first things that we did that grew out of that consultation process was, after developing a memorandum of agreement, was we provided a grant to a nonprofit that purchased the exact Alexander Inn for $500,000. And they in turn deeded the property to an entity that invested millions of dollars to rehabilitate it and open it as an assisted care facility. So our investment led to a productive reuse of that facility, but while at the same time respecting the historic significance of the facility. That was the first significant thing we did as a mitigation action for the loss of historic facilities at the K-25 site. We also collected artifacts. We collected over 800 artifacts. Some of them were of significance. Others turned out to be not very significant. 285 of them are on display right now at the K-25 Atomic History Center, which I'll show you here in a minute. There it is. The K-25 History Center, I think it's been renamed the K-25 Atomic History Center. It's being operated by the American Museum of Science and Energy. And that site hosts 280 something, almost 300 artifacts on display. Everything from pre-Manhattan era artifacts, like in the right top there is the bell from the Wheat School. So pre-Manhattan era through the Manhattan Project era and Cold War era and cleanup. There's a control panel for from the K-25 building there on the right, a model of it. And on the left is a full-scale model of the little boy bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima in August of 1945. The uranium that went in that bomb came from this K-25 building as well as from Y-12. So this is that building, the most recent building that I mentioned earlier. We started off the presentation with. It was opened this past August. We had a stipulation that we were having a hard time meeting. We actually had two different stipulations in our memorandum of agreement. We're having a hard time meeting because the cost was exceeding our available funding. We went back to the consulting parties. We asked the Park Service to work with the signatory parties to the MOA to identify their priorities. And they said our priority is for the public to get a sense of the scale of this facility. It was just the enormity of the facility. That conveyed its historic significance is what the signatory parties to the MOA told us. And they also said, we want the public to be able to actually see the footprint up, as close as they can. And so we built this facility, and you see on the right, as you walk on that second floor, surrounded by glass, and some of you, perhaps most of you, have been to this facility since we opened it last August. And if you haven't, I highly encourage you to go out there. But on the right, you see a tabletop model that orients you to what you're looking at and helps you understand what you're seeing at the former site out there. We also have various audiovisual tools in there to help you visualize that building. Portal 4 was really the only historically significant facility that I can think of that we were able to salvage out there. And we transferred that to the Community Reuse Organization of East Tennessee probably more than a decade ago. They more recently have invested in rehabilitating the facility. They've kept the historic look of the facility, but they've repurposed it and they have donated it to the American Museum of Science and Energy. And they're going to be operating it as a kind of welcome center to the site, place you can get a cup of coffee and kind of get oriented to the site. So while that's kind of another outgrowth of historic preservation efforts because of the transfer of that building, salvaging of it and transferring it to the Community Reuse Organization. So what we have left to do, this again is that first image with the interpretive center in the foreground. The background is the historic footprint. What we have left to do is not much. We're nearly finished. And what we need to do, pursuant to the memorandum of agreement with the signatory parties and all the consulting parties, is put in corner markers, which will help you get a sense it is hard to get a sense of this, of the scale of what you're looking at, just looking out on the landscape itself, especially in the far north end, looking out from that building. So we're going to install corner markers that are the same height of the original building that will help you get a sense both of the horizontal scale and the vertical scale of the building. And the other thing we have left to do is wayside exhibits, outdoor exhibits that we're working with the Park Service to develop and that we plan on installing in the middle of the U, looking out on the surrounding footprint. So that's what we have left to do. What we've learned from this process is, what drove this is just the compliance with the law, the National Historic Preservation Act. And that drove the stakeholder engagement. They were involved in the design review process. Everything you see out there is a result of the stakeholder community and their engagement. And through the authority of the National Historic Preservation Act. That MOA dates back to 2012, and there was actually predecessor MOAs. But the outcome of that is very much complementary to the park. So when the park was created in 2015, we were pretty prepared for the park at the K-25 site because of our compliance with the National Historic Preservation Act and the stipulations that came out of that. We looked at a broader set of interpretive themes in our NHPA compliance, including Cold War era and cleanup era, but there was a lot of overlap. All the Manhattan Project era stuff overlapped with the purpose of the park and their interpretive themes. And so it supported the park. The other thing I would say that we learned from this is, that MOA was signed in 2012. It's been more than 10 years. And I guess we're going on 14 years now. But that passage of time and pressures on funding constraints actually led to more creative outcomes. That interpretive scenario that you saw there was not part of the original vision, but it came about when we kind of realized that, we don't have any authentic process equipment artifacts that we can display because of contamination. That changed. We didn't know that when that MOA was written. That changed the outcome. Our budget changed the outcome, and it led to more creative engagement with the stakeholder community. And I think a better product that everybody seems to be very pleased with. And then the last thing, I think the lessons learned from this is historic preservation, and this will segue into what Abby's going to talk about here, but historic preservation interpretation has actually, I think, helped reindustrialization. I mean, Oak Ridge, instead of running from our past history with nuclear weapons production, has leaned into that, has owned that. And that includes in interpreting the history of the K-25 site. And now that has led us to a place where we are a destination for this new nuclear renaissance that's happening. What the site that was kind of once more associated with the stigma of a closed weapon site is now viewed more as an asset, historic asset to be leaned into. And so with that, I'll turn it over to you, Abby, to speak up to where we're going with reindustrialization.
All right. Well, most of you see me here either lurking in the corner or acting as your alternate DDFO when Roger and Melissa are out. But today, if I can get this to move, push.
Yeah, you have to push it kind of hard.
Maybe not. Doesn't like me. It's okay.
It took me over to show you.
Okay.
Should write straight down.
Okay. Steve's got the magic touch.
Oh,
But today you guys get to hear me talk about my reindustrialization job, which is what I do when I am not doing stuff for the board. So maybe. Goodness. Maybe Steve.
I'll be your clicker.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta
It's
click.
gonna have to happen. Sorry, Steve. So reindustrialization it started out as a leasing program in the 90s. And as we began cleaning up the parks, we would transition to the actual transfer of land and buildings. So that's more of our model that we use today. There have been some talk of starting leases again, but as of right now, we're mostly doing full transfers. And the interesting thing about reindustrialization is that the opportunities aligned for cleanup for private and public interest. As the demand for energy has been increasing this past year, people have been wanting to come in more, and we've had a lot more companies, especially in the past 5 years, come in and want to lean into being a part of the new nuclear renaissance. And what better place to start than where the first nuclear renaissance took place? So go to the next one. So this was originally what we had to work with as a sketch of, we had some slabs in place and some buildings that still need to be torn down, and some other areas where we now have, if you can get it to point to, we have Kairos in that back corner now. And then directly in front of them, we have Radiant coming in. We also have in the center of the picture, we've got Apollo Manufacturing and some more other companies that are supporting. And then over to the right, we can kind of see the beginning of where Oklo is going to start building. But I'll get into that in a clearer visual in just a minute. Next slide. So the property transfer process for remediated space, which is the majority of ETTP, is beginning with the removal of the buildings, the cleanup of the soil, and then we have the transfer of property. If it has been remediated, we go through a process called the covenant deferral request, which is all that blue and green underneath. So it's really tiny, so I'll try and blow it up for you guys as best as I can. So when there is no further action needed, we do our covenant deferral request. That then goes to EPA and TDEC for their first round of comments in case we missed anything on discussing why this parcel is ready to be transferred, why we are ready to transfer it, and what benefit it will create for the community. And then once we get those comments, we revise the CDR. We then post it for public review and comment. You'll see our postings in the Oak Ridge newspaper. And normally we keep the copy for review here at the DOIC. So whenever you see the next public notice for a CDR, you can come in and read for a couple minutes, send me an email. I'll address your comment, and then we'll send it off to EPA and TDEC again for a final review and approval. And then once we get that CDR approval, we'll actually prepare a full transfer package that includes draft memos to Congress for approval. It includes memos and business cases to headquarters to explain who is taking the property, why it's a benefit for the community, why it's a benefit for DOE, and why we feel that it should occur on a certain timeline. So then once that package is prepared, we send it up to headquarters. It then goes through several offices. It'll go through Chief of Finance. It'll go through our attorneys. It'll go through several different places that all have input to make sure that this is in the best interest for the public. Once it has been approved by all those people, it ends up going to the Secretary's office. The Secretary of Energy signs off on it, and then we begin the congressional notification period. So during that time, we tell the Appropriations Committee and the Armed Forces Committee, hey, this is property that you once had stake in. And then they review it and see if it is in the best interest of the government to release it to the community. And then once they approve it, then it goes out to our real estate contracting officer, and they sign off on our behalf and on the deed. And then the deed is brought here to the grantee. Normally that is a nonprofit. So the city of Oak Ridge or the Oak Ridge Industrial Development Board are our typical grantees. And then they countersign, and then it gets recorded for Roane County most of the time. We have had a few Anderson County properties, but it's mostly Roane County properties. Okay, so next slide. So then let me get a little bit into the meat and potatoes. So we begin real property transfers under 10 CFR 770 and CERCLA 120H. Those are our typical laws that we get into. I'll
get a little bit deeper into those in a minute, but a transfer is typically a deed transfer for property ownership. Crowett has been the primary recipient of those, but they are going to begin sunsetting this year. And so now it's going to the City of Oak Ridge or the Oak Ridge Industrial Development Board, because a 10 CFR 770 typically must go to a nonprofit. And then the DOE also uses leases as interim real estate instruments. There's been announcements about leases in Portsmouth and areas like that across the complex. We used to do some leases. We might start doing leases again, but right now, everything that we have on the docket is an actual transfer for title. And so we also have a core group with the Tennessee Economic Community Development that also works with the Oak Ridge Industrial Development Board to help secure interested parties. So the news breakings that you've been seeing, Orano coming, Oklo coming, all these new nuclear companies have been through collaboration with the Tennessee Economic Community Development and the Oak Ridge Industrial Development Board in the city. Okay, so next slide. So getting a little bit deeper into the transfer authorities that we use, 10 CFR 770 is how we actually transfer the property. It has to go to a nonprofit, so it's typically a CRO, like I mentioned, or it goes to the city or the development board. And the transfer has to promote economic development and be in the best interest of DOE, like I mentioned. And it also has the authority to transfer at less than fair market value with indemnification if the grantee requests it. Most of these properties are on ETT proper. There have been missions there. And for that, it's a lot of money to have to build from a brownfield site. So typically, that's why we can transfer at less than fair market value. And they either require considerable infrastructure improvement to make it economically viable or further public policy objectives to the laws governing the downsizing of nuclear defense facilities. ETTP meets both of those requirements. The other authority that we have to use is the CERCLA 120H process, which is that CDR process that I mentioned earlier. The other thing that is under CERCLA 120H is also something called a clean parcel determination, which is a lot like a CDR, but it is when DOE has held property, but it has never had mission on it, so it is uncontaminated. We still have to create a clean parcel determination and send it through EPA and TDEC for them to agree that we can then transfer it. So for clean parcel, that would be like the SSP2 recent transfer, where there was no actual DOE mission on SSP2. So it's clean and we can actually go through EPA and TDEC's approval to then have it sent to headquarters for transfer. Okay, next slide. And then, so here is the broader picture of what's going on. We have transferred over to 2,500 acres to date. That is everything that you see in blue and some of what you see in purple. The 397 acres that are still being in process is the purple to the far right and some purple kind of in the center of that blue blob on the left, for lack of a better term. And there's about 3,500 acres remaining of EM land. Our goal is to no longer have EM portfolio land by 2028. So that includes our Black Oak Ridge Conservation Easement. Do not panic, it's still going to be a conservation easement. And the ED24 CDR is underway and the balance of land CDR is also underway. So we have a lot of exciting things on the docket and it does look like we will be able to meet that 2028 timeline. So with that, I will wrap up unless there are any questions.
All right, yeah, thank you. Turn it over. We'll open the board up for questions from board members on the topic. presentation. So,
I live over on the other side of the river from the what I just call the powerhouse land or Carbon Rivers. It has been a thorn in my side, for lack of a better word, because of it's become a windmill blade junkyard, essentially. And I just wonder if there are maybe lessons learned from that transfer, because there were wetlands that were transferred. I don't understand why those wetlands were transferred to begin with. The barge terminal that was there, which I think the barge terminal and the portal building are what I would call the only two structures left at the K-25 site to maybe protect them. And, you know, I haven't looked at it in any depth, but, you know, you had clean land. And in a matter of less than 2 years, it was conveyed in June of 2024. It's a big mess right now. I guess, are there any lessons learned going forward as other land is transferred to help prevent something like that from happening again?
So Steve can answer this better than I can, because he was on the powerhouse transfer. But I will take my best crack at it, which is that the powerhouse is a lessons learned kind of moment. Typically, the people who are interested in ETTP are startup companies or nuclear companies. And while there has been a lesson learned with Carbon Rivers, that's also where our site reuse support program comes in now, where we will be working with the companies to help ensure that we have a better idea of their scope. And so they will have to present to us some of their construction plans and their soil and groundwater management plans to have EPA, TDEC, and DOE look at it.
And two, I have to think maybe, and this is just speculation on my part, that airport and the city wanted an airport there, to me, had to impact maybe the value of that land. To me, it's more valuable now than it may have been when it was transferred to Carbon Rivers. I don't know, but.
So yes and no. Our property sales, it's like all other real estate. It's based off of previous sales. So there's also the challenges of having a brownfield site as well that cause the price to be lower per acre. It's also typically used for industrial purposes only. And so having more companies come in and purchase land from the IDB or the city have caused the additional prices to go up.
And I think that connects to another thread here that I think is going to be helpful to us. One is, as Abby mentioned, we've established this site reuse support program. So we're working hand in hand with developers at the site now to help them. But in addition to that, when that powerhouse area was transferred, it was based on a request that we had received years previously, and based on negotiated sale that had been arranged dating actually pre-2024. There was already kind of an understanding there with the Community Reuse Organization of East Tennessee and the company that you mentioned. Since then, there's obviously with this nuclear renaissance, the value of property sites going up. That's good. That is good for the site. That is leading to high quality development. There was a time at ETTP when we had a hard time giving land away. And the powerhouse transfer was at a transition point. It was at a point where we were going through the struggle of giving land away and what's the identity of this site's going to be, to all of a sudden the perfect storm coming about with new nuclear, the technology, the interest in carbon neutral energy production, the advent of AI ultimately in more recent time. And so that perfect storm has brought about high quality development. That's the best thing for that site. And actually, it probably is the best hope for the future of the powerhouse, the future redevelopment of the powerhouse area.
Thank you.
There's one thing I would like to add too, is that once we transfer the property, we have no control over it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, as Steve and Abby pointed out, we transferred the powerhouse, we transferred it to Croat.
Mhm.
Then Croat sold it to Carbon Rivers. We knew, as Steve pointed out, it was a long process. We knew that was probably what was going to happen. Nobody had an understanding of what was going to happen with Carbon Rivers at that time. But once that transfer had occurred, Carbon Rivers could have turned around and said, we're not going to do windmill blades. We're going to do something entirely different. And we would have had we still have no control over that. Everything that's going on out there now is between the state of Tennessee and Carbon Rivers and local governments.
Mhm.
Other than our responsibility to make sure that and it was not transferred as clean, it is a brownfield.
Right.
We are still responsible for making sure that the CERCLA restrictions and land use controls are in place. But beyond that, what they use the property for, we have no control of that.
Yeah, there's two, there's the CERCLA and then there's the National Environmental Policy Act.
Right.
But those provide broad framework for development. They do not get down into specifics.
Mr. Lewis?
Earlier, Steve mentioned something about a new building that had exhibits of what was being done during the Manhattan Project. I wanted to find out if I could go and do I need to get some kind of clearance or some kind of, just show up and?
Yeah, that's the special thing about the interpretive facilities at the K-25 site is completely open to the public. So that among all of the Manhattan Project National Historic Park sites, K-25 is the most publicly accessible, so it makes it special. And yes, you absolutely can go out there. We do have a partnership with the American Museum of Science and Energy to operate that site. So when you go there, they will facilitate, the doors are open. They have operating hours just like they do for their facility here in town.
As a side note, that will be part of the tour next week.
Great.
All right, Ms. Picardi?
I'm digging into my foggy brain. And when you were saying no control, but you do have Brown control. I mean, they can't decide to put an apartment complex there.
That's right. That's prohibited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are
So
bounds.
there are restrictions on the deed that they bought.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because it sounded
It can only be
initially
used for
like,
industrial purposes.
yeah. Industrial buildings get turned into old folks' homes. I'm thinking down the line, but I think the deed restrictions on it would say, no, it can't be a residence, it can't be a school,
Right.
it can't be.
So one of the things under CERCLA is for areas where we have a decision document that's been executed, for instance, this is covered under the Zone 1 runoff. We have to do what's called a 5-year review. Every 5 years, we sit down with EPA and TDEC and look at the area that was covered under that remedy and make sure. And one of the big things is to do a review of land use controls. So if somebody is out there beginning to construct an apartment complex, I will guarantee you EPA will be there waving a red flag. They will definitely catch that. And we will catch it before that. We We do routine
But you-
inspections
Yeah,
annually.
you really can't say your hands are washed of it. Your hands are still.
Only as far as making sure that they are obeying the deed restrictions,
Deed
land use control.
I wanted to hear again.
But,
on the deed restrictions. Yeah.
Like I said, all of zone 1 and zone 2 were zoned, or the deed say they're for industrial use. That's a pretty
They
big
can't do a
term,
well, they can't do all kinds of things, right?
right?
Thank you.
So the clean land, they can build a school on it.
I don't, I believe I know that we do not allow any residential use of clean land. I know there's a prohibition on school or there's a prohibition on.
Like a community center or something like that, or why?
It's just dependent on the property.
Yeah.
If we have more companies coming in, that's good, but then we're gonna need,
It's an elementary school out west.
Yeah.
They're a little
Right,
crowded.
yeah, so we're gonna bring in more people, it's growing, we need to have places.
Yeah.
Build those. No, not, are they, none of the land is used for that.
Most of it's not.
Mhm.
There are, when we do a clean parcel determination, there's a little more flexibility. But that still depends on negotiations between the state, DOE and EPA.
Yeah.
And how the transfer paperwork is written. We've done some clean parcel determination or transfers where there's language in there that, no, you can't have a school. But
Yeah.
we've done others where, yeah, that is permissible.
The other board members? We will open up public questions on the presentation.
Yes, Mr. Gibson, I've got a question on the presentation. I had a question to Eric about some of the nuclear companies out there, like Standard Nuclear are planning to come back here in DOE jurisdiction and create DOE Category 2 nuclear facilities. And I have a question about, that being subject to the emergency management orders, things like that. Has anyone got anything they could say about that?
So yes, first, you're correct. There is an effort to evaluate bringing those organizations under DOE jurisdictions to NRC. The effort has not progressed to the point where we're evaluating the emergency response aspect yet. As you can imagine, we never thought this would probably happen to us, so we never really prepared for it. So we're having to evaluate, look at new processes and things like that.
Well, I mean, the implementation of the orders like, what 1.1, that Teresa's well aware of. And we did it like well, and,
But it's also important to understand that one of the things DOE is going through right now too is evaluating.
no, I don't think they'll get rid of that one, but.
They're not getting rid of their revising.
Yeah.
Any additional, Mr. Closho? Do you have something?
Uncle Glazer, 103 Monsell Road. I'm heavy member on our Greenways Oak Ridge and we have two well-established greenway trail systems at the West Bourse and at the Wheat Trail at the corner there that goes down to the George Zone. I'd like the board to take an active interest in finding a way to get an easement for Greenway from those two trailheads across the site that would give industry access to the greenways right from their businesses, access for the public to the Interpretive Center and Museum and the Port Ford Museum. I think that would be a great asset to everyone. I brought this up with the Oklo senior staff member, Ed Lamont, and he said our security perimeter is at our fence. So we race green light trails through the site in terms of our security footprint. So that the board could get engaged in that, I think that'd help. I know right now the Oak Ridge Corridor Development Corporation is looking at all the vacant land at Heritage Center that's been freed up with cleanup and how to restructure it for more efficient utilization. And it just seems to be a lot of streets and parking lots and areas that are sort of segregated but not effectively being utilized. So the Green Light Trail easement as part of that planning seems to be a good opportunity. So appreciate that. I was at the Mr. Walsh's welcoming today, and I went up and said, how about going on a bike ride on one of our greenways? His comment to me was, hey, you know, I'm an avid shop. Said I might do that sometime I'm in town. Mr. Robbins' comments about how he was engaged and impressed with what we had going here it was pretty, and his remarks at the welcoming at 4 o'clock reflected on that point that you made. I think he really impressed and sees all that's been accomplished. Anyway, we were talking about the firehouse and how that's worked out so well. 2 weeks ago, Croat sold 18 acres to a company called Oak Ridge Biofuels, 18 acres. I read their emissions permit request to TDEC. Certainly not a nuclear facility. They're going to chemical process it to break wood down and make diesel fuel. It includes having 520,000 gallon tanks. It works out, but the issue. We were talking about Portal 4 briefly. Actually, AMSI's having a greet the public open house at Portal 4 at 4 o'clock tomorrow, I think. So, I mean, it's AMSI members, but I'm sure they'd like new members. Somebody wants to. In fact, the chamber's having a ribbon cutting at Portal 4 on Saturday morning. I think about the museums out there. I came for a job interview in May of 1968. Pretty much been here for a while. And I came up the steps there at K1000 and the facility. When I see the, history interpretive center, it really is rewarding to see that facility for mine personally, thinking about all of it. At one point, of course, it was after the K-25 had shut down that I began working there. But I had often to go down into the middle of the U. For some reason, I always wanted to walk through K-25. So I go in the building, get on one floor, walk a half mile, come down, and the only people around, the only activity were a few pigeons moving around up there. But to see that overlook there, I was there at the interpretive center last week, and was it California license plate, Massachusetts license plate, Minnesota license. People are finding out about it. People from Bandex were there, and I was chatting with them. He said, well, I just retired from Bandex, but I always wanted to see what K-25 was. So of all the museums in town, I suspect that one is going to get the most visibility. And your work on the view and how you reimagine that is, I could see an interpretive trail around the U with vintage bicycle racks on each corner that people rode in the building to run all the controls. Anyway, there's a lot of great things going on. Appreciate what the board is doing, and I think we're lucky that Teresa, her, what they call it, institutional knowledge, is here with us to help us move forward. I've been a member of ETEC for a while, and her remarks at ETEC over the years have been spot on. So appreciate all the board's doing. Thank you for the time to offer a few comments.
Thank you.
No questions about the presentation on just general.
General, we're general.
Okay, can I have my
Yeah.
general
Move
comments?
to public comment if there are no other questions about the presentation.
Okay, yeah, I'm Luther Gibson. I was chair of the board 2002, and retired from Montreal in 2017. And I just point out that in my last, when I was board chair in 2002, the last recommendation of my regime was that the SSAB be a consulting program for 25 preservation. So we started back about then. My comments are printed and distributed. I have, I'm going to be at Savannah River in a couple of weeks, not being able to come to the committee, for the ongoing efforts to ensure waste disposal capacity, but I provide my thoughts. They made difference in what the scope of the recommendation is turning out to be. But I did point out that since the last recommendations, things that happened, like the perpetual care fund went away, and there was also the Wheeler decision that resolved a dispute. That there may be some clarifications on the water discharges and applicability of water regulations. That might need to be explained. And I think anyway, if you go back to recommendation on EMD, you need to understand the whole Bear Creek watershed a little better, just not make it, with regard to EMDF. And then, and also, I think one of the questions is assurance of waste capacity. EM's always answered the question about, do we have adequate capacity in the disposal cell? What's in their scope? Well, in the annual site environmental report, Waterville talks about tearing down buildings like Beta 2E as far out as 2055. And then there's a lot of buildings at O&L that they tend to get put into the ROD instead of an AM, so there's a lot of buildings at O&L, even including the Transuranic Waste Processing Center, got included in that recently. So a lot of stuff out there, and they're probably planning in the future for. Then there's, I've talked about this before, there's this tool called WIMS, the University of Florida's maintained, and there's an example of disposition map in your thing here that generates. It's not real clear how well that's supported anymore. It's thing headquarters has had the Florida National University do for a number of years. I think it's a good use of tool to illustrate where things go. That's just an example of a GIS map of where things go from Oak Ridge. But keeping the data current in it is a job. And who's interested? Okay, then also, I point out here that maybe there's things about whip there, being new fast about blue 2-4. Then, eventually the Hall Road is going to be dealt with. We're gonna continue using it or abandoned places, the original ROD, said. So that's a stakeholder input, not that everyone should weigh in on possible. And then there's a bunch of recommendations listed from back in the dark ages on EMWF and on-site disposal waste, surface waste in general. I think as far as reindustrialization of VTTP, I got the question out about the DOE jurisdiction for some of the facilities that are there. And then, well, the budget, I guess we'll talk about later. The EM section of the congressional budget justification just came out this morning. And of course, that's preliminary, it'll change, but it looks like or was down about $100,000. But that'll be negotiated, put back in Congress, perhaps as appropriations bills goes forward. So these are things I'm trying to follow and trying to help you follow. So thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions?
No questions online. No additional comments.
Oh, okay. I thought you said there was. We have any, request for new action items? Please. The next meeting is gonna be, May 13th at 6. Do you have any additions? Motion. Second. First, second. That'll adjourn us. Presenters, you're welcome to go if you like. Thank you for the presentation.
Go home.
Okay. Start our business, or, board meeting, board business. Guess I'll go ahead. I don't have anything to really add. I'll turn it over to Melissa, to the DFO.
I don't have anything other than I wanted to bring up the fact that we had asked for a recommendation on the, that had not been on the work plan. We've sent out the last recommendation we wrote on,
Waste disposal.
on the, I'm sorry, I'm like, I can't find my notes, on waste disposal, but we've not had anybody, jump in on the conversation. So we're just gonna, we'd like for you to relook at the old recommendation to see, what, if you agree with it. The body of the first page and a half, that's boilerplate. You do not have to do anything on that. Where we're looking for you to do is to look at the bullets at the bottom. If you look at it and you agree with the past board rec, you can say, we agree. If you have something extra, if you disagree with something on it, mark those bullets up to where they fit your thing. But we need somebody we've got Chris on board but we need somebody else to kind of help communicate with them so that we can create a recommendation for that. So
And if you're not on the issue group and you want to pitch in, it'd be good practice for when we do the budget in May. Just let me know and I can add you to the email stream.
I have a question. The last page of the materials, is the May calendar accurate?
Oh, we don't have it. Oh, we skipped out. It should be the 13th should be the board meeting and the stewardship should be the 27th.
Catch.
So, like Shelley said, if you want to be on the committee, let Shelley or Sarah know and they can add you to any discussions. You just kind of need to look at the old recommendations, see if you want to go forward with that, see if there's something new you want to add. We want to try to get something jump started. So before we get to the EM stewardship meeting, you've actually got something you can work on.
Yes, we'd really like over the next week or so for a draft to at least be around so that when y'all come in here, week after next, that we're not starting from scratch. We can put up the document on the board and then we can actually edit the document live here. But it really helps if there's a starter.
And the draft we're talking about is not the whole document. We're talking about the bullets.
Yeah.
Here's the recommendations.
And if nobody volunteers, I'll probably yank some of the officers in because that's you got voluntold when you got elected. Sorry.
Very good.
And that's all I have on that.
Thank you. All right. Committee reports on the executive. We met, we didn't have a lot to talk about. We talked about the spring chairs that's coming up. That is the 28th and 29th of April. And I'm sure there'll be a link sent out to get on and watch that. I'd encourage you to. It's pretty interesting to see some of the national events going on, and that's where you would see that. So That was about all. We didn't have a lot to discuss. The next meeting is May 6th on that. So, yeah, the next executive meeting. And turn it over to Carl for our.
Mayor, last meeting we had, talked a little bit about waste management. We also had quorum, which was good to see that we had enough people, officers here to be able to do a vote. We voted in the steward co-chairs. Laura is off now.
She was here earlier.
Yeah, she was. She must have just dumped off because I hadn't just glanced up. And myself were voted in as stewardship co-chairs. And then our next meeting will be April 22nd.
Yeah. Congratulations on officer election there. Do we have any additions to the agenda?
I have one note.
Uh-huh.
We're about to start recruitment for our next set of members. We're gonna need about 7 members. So if there's anyone you think might be interested, please shoot them an email. The form to indicate interest is on our website, or if you have someone, let me know and I can email them directly some directions. But we'd like to give special consideration to potential members that come from you guys.
Any other additions?
Motion.
Second. All right, we'll go 7. Thank you.